So we're at about 5 after. I see we have 10 people online, and we may add some more as the session goes on. But Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about what the session is, or would you like me to?
Yeah. So honestly, the brainstorm behind having office hours was just to bring our community together, bring our region together, let folks from other regions, other geographic locations come and ask us questions about what might be happening in RDA-US. I am very new to the RDA. I was actually looking back at some materials today from the original planning meeting in 2012. For RDA that was in Washington, D.C. on the US side. And so I was seeing a lot of familiar names from that original meeting, folks I've seen in the plenary over the last 2 weeks. So that was pretty interesting and fascinating to me. So I was actually involved in 2012, and I've come back around. Was asked to be program manager for RDA-US. So I am Robert Ping. I've met most of you already in other sessions. Thank you so much for attending today. I did put a collaborative doc in the chat, and we'll post that a couple of times as new people come in. But it would be great to know who attended today. So much like the other sessions that you might have attended during the plenary, if you can add your name and affiliation, your geographic location, and your email address. I promise we will not spam you with a lot of email. But if something does come up today and we take notes about it, especially opportunities for collaboration, working groups that you might know about that where we can help with US involvement. We have lots of different things that we'd love to talk about, but we really want to hear from you. So I think we should do a quick roundtable. I see a couple people from our steering committee. There are three of us online from the program office. And so, Rob, I'm going to let you introduce yourself as well, and Yolanda, and we'll just kind of do a round the room. I think we have a few enough people that we can do that. And then we'll open it up to questions from our community here.
Sure. So I'm Rob Quick. I am at Indiana University. Actually, I'm sitting right now on the campus of Florida International University doing a outreach program for cyber infrastructure this week that actually leverages the RDA CoData Schools of Research Data Science curriculum that was developed within RDA. So I'm taking some of the RDA outputs and putting them to use in a real world setting. So as I said, I'm at Indiana University. I've been a part of RDA since 2014, so almost the entire time, but not quite. I am the co-chair of the Technical Advisory Board for RDA. I have a long history in cyber infrastructure. I'm currently the director of the Cyber Infrastructure Integration Research Center, which really means I help researchers find solutions for their computing problem. More and more of that is aimed at data in the last several years. So I've also been very active in this community. Outside of that, I will not go on too long, but I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say in the office hours, and I'm here to answer questions. So I'll let Yolanda go next.
Hi, everyone. I think I know many of you, but not all. I have been with RDA since 2014. I have a background before that of project management and communications. Since in my role at RDA, I've been supported through the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute through funding there that transitioned into the Ronin Institute under Rebecca Koskela, and now through Indiana University, thanks to Beth and Rob Quick and Robert here. I'm in a role as a consultant, strategic communications, and also do as my role in my role, I provide we're providing in-kind support to the Secretariat. So I'm affiliated with them most on a part-time basis, and then as needed, I work with the U.S. office too. And I'll keep it short, but that's about it. And I think anyone is next. I think that's our office right now. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go on to Saeed. I recognize him as being part of the steering committee for RDA-US.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm Saeed Chaudhry at Carnegie Mellon University. the Associate Dean for Digital Infrastructure. Um, I actually was involved in some of the very earliest conversations around RDA with Alan Wojtecki when he was at NSF. Maybe involved with RDA when it was just a twinkle in the eye. So it's really great to be part of the RDA-US group and the Tigers effort. I believe it's called the software area expert, but I just like to think of myself as a software sounding board. And it's in that capacity that I'm a member of the steering committee.
Great, Saeed, thanks so much. Yes, I've updated the slides to open area expert, so that's the term we're using now. Amy, I see you're typing. Would you also like to introduce yourself while you're typing away in the collaborative doc?
Maybe not while I'm typing at the same time. It looks like I'm not paying attention to everyone then.
I can't do that. I cannot type and be on a Zoom call at the same time. So I'm glad recordings happen so I can go back and take notes.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. If I haven't met you before, my name is Amy Nernberger. I'm at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where I'm the interim head for data and specialized services and the program head for data management services. I sit on the RDA-US steering committee as an ex officio member, as I am a member of the RDA Global Council. Thank you.
Awesome. Great, Amy. Thanks so much. Steve, another member of our steering committee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, sure, as I'm not writing like Amy is. Hi, I'm Steve Diggs. I'm part of the University of California Office of the President. Some of you may know me from my past affiliation with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. My expertise is research data, and I'm happy to be serving on the RDA-US steering committee with all the exciting things that we have in front of us.
Great. And Zach, also a member of our steering committee.
Hey, everybody. My name is Zach Chandler. I'm at Stanford University with the Center for Open and Reproducible Science. And I'm also executive director of open source at Stanford, which is a open source projects office. So I'm a 1 degree of Saeed Chowdhury across like 6 things that I'm doing. So sorry, Saeed, you have to look at my face again on a Zoom. But I'm delighted to be working with this group and the open science efforts. RDA-US is looking for ways to leverage its particular strengths to also engage with other work happening across the community in novel and helpful ways.
Great, thanks. And let's just go around the room. Zachary, we were chatting earlier. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm Zachary Trott. So just as how you and the other Robert are going by Ping and Quick, I might have to go by Trott. I'm at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm in the Data and AI-driven material science group. I've been a member of RDA since 2015. And yeah, I'm heavily involved and very much interested in all things data and informatics.
Great. Let's see, somebody else who's been following me around today, Dennis, or I've been following around, one or the other.
I'm definitely following you around. It's nice to meet you all. I'm Dennis Peel. I'm a scientific software developer at the RCSV Protein Data Bank, where we house the 3-dimensional structures of protein molecules. And I'm somewhat new to this RDA community. This is my first plenary. So our organization has always had an interest in open data, and we always make sure our data is completely free and anybody around the world can use it however they want. But we're really trying to take a further step in making sure that we're adhering to all the FAIR principles, all the trust principles. So here I am trying to learn about what the community offers and ways that we can continue expanding our fairness. So nice to meet you all.
Great, thanks so much. And Sun Young?
Dennis, before we go on, Dennis, can I
sure.
ask what it looks like a scatter plot behind you? Can I ask what data you have in your background there?
Sure. It's a solid state NMR spectrum behind me, a two-dimensional spectrum. Solid state NMR is one of the methods that is used to determine the three-dimensional structure of a protein. And so this happened to be what my PhD was in, so I like to broadcast it as much as I can.
Gotcha.
Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Sanyang Kim. I'm a senior support scientist in data management sharing services group at Becker Medical Library of Washington University in St. Louis. It was a mouthful, but I define myself as data librarian. Before I became a data librarian, I did a lot of things. But if you're curious, you can connect me with connect me on LinkedIn. You can see what I've done before. But right now, my main job is I support faculty, staff, and researchers on medical campus. So with the NIH CMS policy, a lot of my time is spent on reviewing the data management sharing plan. And I'm also so actually as a part of that, actually, I was a working member. I'm still a working member of the MP2 NIH CMS, the template working group. So within the MP2 did not have a template before this policy went into effect. So it was a huge deal and nobody knew what to expect. So actually I was a part of the working group led by Maria Pratzelis and Nina, Exner. So we did develop a default template and another one, which is the IC specific template NIH and IMH. But also I create data set for our institutional repository. Digital Commons Data at Becker, which is same platform and Mendeley data. So I have a great interest in, making, DMSP machine actionable and using the PIDs to kind of make it machine actionable. So from the start, planning to implementation and then data set discovery and reuse. So this falls right into my interest. I learned a lot by attending the plenary and I know so much about now what RDA is about, how I can contribute. So I really appreciate that. And thanks, Jack, for inviting me to join the RDA-US. So that was a connection to become a member of RDA. Thanks.
Wonderful. And I'm glad to hear from you. We've been in lots of sessions together, and I actually didn't know your background. So it's nice to know so much.
Yeah,
Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Aaron Kaplan. I'm a software developer on the IRI data library at Columbia University. It's a repository of climate data and also data on human activities that are related to climate or affected by climate. And it's also a computing platform where people can do calculations, analyses, visualizations of climate data on a server that's close to the data. And this is my first, this week and last week are my first experience with RDA and trying to get the lay of the land.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, Anna.
Hi, thanks everyone. I'm Anna Van Gulik. I'm at the repository Figshare, where I am our government and funder lead, mainly working with US funders and federal agencies to support their public access to research. And I am also wearing another hat today, which is as part of the NIH GRAY program, the Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative. So Figshare is one of 7 generalist repositories participating in that NIH-funded work. And we are interested in continuing our collaboration with RDA working groups and RDA members to gather feedback on our outputs and the work that GRAY is doing to facilitate data sharing and reuse in generalist repositories. I have probably been part of RDA since 2015, I want to say. When was Amsterdam? Maybe February of 16 was my first plenary when I was at Carnegie Mellon University prior to Figshare as a postdoc and as a librarian for open science and data. And I'm based in Seattle. I think that's everything.
Fantastic. So you've met 3/4 of the program office and a good deal of the steering committee. I'm glad you're all here. I do have a few slides really only to introduce you folks who may not know who the rest of the steering committee is for RDA-US. So I thought I would just share that with you really quickly, and then we'll get to so you've met, you can see my slide. Let's make it into a slideshow. There we go. So you should be seeing just the RDA-US program officers. The way we are set up as a governance body is that the program officers are also members of the steering committee. The next slide shows Zach and Saeed, who both introduced themselves, and Beth Playley, our executive director, is leading our third area that we are concentrating on with RDA-US, at least in this first year, and that's cyber infrastructure and artificial intelligence. And then our steering committee. So you met Steve, you met Amy, and these are the other members, Stuart, Meredith, Natalie, Shelley, Cynthia, and someone who's behind Michael, of course. Yeah, that was really all that I wanted to do, was to introduce you to the people who are part of RDA-US, to put out there that we are actively addressing some of the specific challenges that the program office identified with direction from the steering committee. We created the Tigers Facilitation Program, which Rob Quick is leading. And for today, we just wanted to have a couple of questions that we threw out to the folks attending. And that is, what activities would you like to see RDA-US engage? And how would you address funding those activities? And so I'd like to open it up to those questions, or to any other questions that you might have, because we really want to make this about you. So I know Sun Young is interested in having the MADMP, Machine Actionable DMP, and I'm happy to say that we're already involved in that. That's one of the programs that we are going to be facilitating with the Tigris program.
Right.
From RDA.
I think I attended a session where you guys shared the two, working group. I don't know if you have a, more working group, inviting more working group to be formed, or any other plans. But first of all, in terms of funding, I attended Tiger, and should I pronounce Tigris or, Tigris? Whichever one. I think I'm leaning toward Tigris, but I know you want me to pronounce Tigris. So, anyway, so the funding, in terms of funding, Tiger program has their own funding, so you can get like a facilitator and all this stuff. But you made it clear that we are not. I mean, actually, they made it clear we're not eligible for their funding, so we are kind of funded separately from Tiger program or RDA. So we have to self-fund ourselves. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so let me say that Tigris is right now a pilot program, and it's funded by some seed funding by Indiana University and the Pervasive Technology Institute. So we're looking for a way to fund Tigris, Tigris at a larger level to be able to facilitate more programs. Right now, we have this pilot. We want to show that the benefits of having a facilitator work with the working groups. But we really have very minimal funding, and the idea is to go to various different funding organizations after we show value with this pilot program, and look for larger funding that we can really facilitate more programs. We have minimal funding, and that is basically a little bit of Rob Ping and a little bit of my effort to work on Tigris right now. The Tiger program, which is a European program, is funded by as part of EOSC, so they have a little more latitude. We're hoping to grow our program as large as the Tiger program in the future, but it's really in this kind of seed pilot now. Viewing this from an RDA overall perspective, the Tiger program and the Tigris program are really there to help facilitate the needs of the working groups as they move towards the whatever their defined outputs are. And let the people who are running those groups really concentrate on the materials that they're going to be producing, the community gathering the input and such, and that the Tiger helps facilitate some of the other administrative and communication and organizational back and forth that happens between a working group and RDA. So the idea is to have the co-chairs and the people in the working groups being able to concentrate on the outputs of that working group while we help with some of the other things surrounding that, whether it's scheduling, whether it's administrative, whether it's planning, whatever it may be, to kind of ease the burden of this being normally done on almost entirely a volunteer effort. And if if we're getting all this amazing voluntary effort working on these products, you don't necessarily want the people working on that to also have to run jump through all these administrative hoops and communication hoops that it takes to get a product off the ground. So I explained a little bit more in depth of what the Tigers program is there, and I talked about funding, but Sun Young, we would hope that in someday RDA, through its regions and through its core organization, are able to facilitate all groups, right? So we want the people who are running groups to concentrate on getting a good, solid output for those working groups. Less so with interest groups, because interest groups aren't really focused on a product moving forward. So I think I answered your question plus about 4 other questions there.
So one thing I want to clear up, and then I'm gonna call on Zachary, who's had his hand up. One thing I want to clear up is that the Tiger program and the Tigress program, we are available to help all working groups. So I think, Sun Young, your question to the Tiger group might have been miscommunicated. You can apply, if you're part of any working group, you can apply to Tiger, and it doesn't matter where you're geographically located. They are, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are open to helping facilitate any working group. They have their own set of criteria of who they can accept. And Tigress is open to facilitating any working group either. However, our goal is to make sure that the US voice is present in those working groups. So it would be highly unlikely that we would facilitate a group that did not have a US voice. However, we might help that working group find people in the US so that the US voice is represented in that working group, right? So you can apply, if you're part of a working group, you can apply for facilitation from either Tiger or Tigress. Yeah, so that's the end of that. And I'm gonna let Zachary chime in here because he's had his hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, and I put the point I was going to make in the notes document, and I think a really good role for RDA-US would be to sort of integrate itself with all the other sort of data-oriented groups that exist in the US. And I gave just one example, that being the NSF Big Data Innovation Hubs, and those things have events. And I think that the outcome would be that RDA-US could serve as the connective tissue between activities going on in those groups and activities going on in the broader RDA. And there's more than groups like that. And I think it's definitely within scope. Like the International RDA has co-branded events like with International Data Week. And I think it's really important that we try to do this, because I have been involved in some of those sort of types of meetings and groups in like NSF Big Data Hubs and other things. And there are wheels being reinvented, right? So having that connective tissue I think would be really good.
I'm going to put a couple people on the spot. So Saeed or Zach, would you like to chat a little bit? Because I completely agree, and the program office completely agrees with you, Zachary. And Zach and Saeed have been making some inroads into connecting some of our different communities in the US and abroad within their areas of expertise. So would either one of you like to sort of talk about a few of the communities that you're working on that connective tissue element?
Thank you, Zachary, for bringing this up. Like Steve's comments, I completely agree with you. And I think we could use your help in figuring out where all the pieces are, because I don't, I think it's too big of a system. I think some of us know some of it. I don't think any of us know all of it. For my part, I've been working on connecting the Helios open community and the data curation network and RDA-US. So there's a coordinated effort that we haven't unveiled yet, but that we're working on with those two groups. But you mentioned, NSF work on, national cyber infrastructure and things like that. So I feel like this is where we can tap into the wisdom of crowds. And, if you can help us figure out the rest of the map, maybe we have a better shot at stitching some of this together.
And let me say specifically about the big data innovation hubs. I've been in contact with 3 of the 4 executive directors. Actually, there might be 5, but I think it's 4. The Southeast, the Northeast, and the West hub. They have been interested in collaborating, but mostly on the education front. We have a workshop that happens yearly that is an RDA CoData workshop with the South Big Data Hub. And Steve is actually a part of that also. But the interest that I've gotten from them is all around education, not necessarily some of the other things that are happening within RDA. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to pursue that. It's just that that's where we've engaged so far. The other one is the CoData. There's a U.S. National Committee for CoData that is something that we are trying to define exactly what that relationship should be between them and RDA-US, and that's something we're actively working on. So,
and I think I wanted to pick up on something that Zachary said earlier about wheels being reinvented, and that's where the real pain comes in. So, this happens all the time, but if we could put our shoulder behind somebody else's project instead of making another one parallel to it that's unaware of that other work, that would be ideal. And that's kind of where I like to live, is like practical demonstration projects, prototypes, or like building things. So Sun Young was talking earlier about machine actionable DMPs. Well, we are connected with ARL and the MADMP pilot. So that could stitch into all sorts of RDA-US or RDA working groups on persistent identifiers and things like that. And actually, this would be a question for the group. One of the things I noticed is that DMP tool, specifically dmptool.org, I think has special affordances that make it really great for connecting persistent identifiers, but it's not necessarily the norm outside the US. Has this been a topic of conversation before in terms of connecting with, like, say, some of our colleagues in Canada that might be using a different kind of tool for data management plans?
There was a talk about standardization. Oh, Rory actually raised his hand, so let him go first.
I'll comment on that, Zach, and I also had another comment I was going to make, but absolutely. So the DMP and John Chodacki is the person to really shed light on this, but yes, the DMP tools, the various DMP tools around the world are very well networked, and they are doing a lot of work together on machine actionable DMPs. So the landscape is basically DMP tool is US, DMP online is Europe, DMP assistant is Canada, and DMP Opador is France. All of them originate from the same DMP roadmap code base. So those are kind of, to some extent, although they're beginning to diverge, but they're clones and they work together. Then there are a couple of, then Australia has its own, Germany has its own, Argos is kind of an EOSC one. And there's a really interesting new one called Data Stewardship Wizard, which is more of a project management tool as well as a DMP tool. So that's a quick helicopter view of the landscape. But John, there was a conference in Edinburgh in January, IDCC conference, where there was a whole day spent on interoperability, which is basically around DMP tools. And just as a point of interest, John and I are putting together, hopefully, a workshop on vertical interoperability, which is interoperability between DMP tools, repositories, other kind of tools as well. So the answer is the DMP tool landscape it's well understood and well networked. And I think if you wanted a quick, John is the guy to talk to. The other point I was going to make is more general. So it's interesting. I've been reflecting after the call with Canada. I really like. I know the fact that you guys are bottom up, which has its disadvantages in terms of funding, which you're well aware of. But to me, it's more in line with the RDA ethos. And different national RDAs, some of them, like the UK, is very top down. Canada seems like it's top down. It's their national body which is doing it. But what made me think of it today was, I think the German one is very similar to the US one, maybe because it's a large country and it's more of a federated approach. So the German RDA is very much like what you're just thinking about, like how they bring in all the different groups in Germany, the NFDIs, so they're much more thinking about how to like put together a collective of different groups to make something work, which is what you're just saying would be useful. So I would recommend that you connect with the German RDA folks to get their experience, and also it wouldn't be a bad thing to have more international collaboration. So that would be something to think about.
Great.
Yes, absolutely. And let me say, both from your the information going around, Tigris is supporting the machine actionable DMP work that Maria is doing with adoption. So that's one of the two projects that Tigris has identified to work with and do some adoption assistance with her and some dissemination of the work that she's been doing. Now, Maria has a few funded grants to roll out machine actionable DMPs at certain institutions, and we're going to be helping with that. So, and yes, the National PID Strategies is the other working group that we're working with, and we're looking for a third. And I want to go back up to Sun-Young about potential travel. That is something that if we get funding outside of Indiana University, we would work in that Tigris could potentially fund, especially people who are leading working groups to attend RDA plenaries. There's a little bit of funding from Indiana University. I don't know if that's set to travel anyone outside of the program office, because again, it's minimal seed funding to kind of get this to a place that we can have greater funding. Now we're looking to NSF, NIH, all the usual organizations, but if anyone has ideas as to specific calls or places that we might go to look for funding, we are happy to we're happy to hear that.
And I did want to give Saeed an opportunity as well to talk about inroads that he might be making into that connective tissue in the software vein.
Yeah, so the way that I will start describing this is something called the Open Source Programs Office, or OSPO. You may or may not have heard about this. So this is one of the ways I'm happy to see Zach, as we are both involved in the OSPOs at our respective institutions. And so this is a concept that's existed in the private sector for a while, but is still fairly new in the university sector. But both Zach and I are involved in a network called Curious, the Consortium of University and Research Institution OSPOs, so CURIOSS. I believe we're up to 20 members now across the US and Europe. So it's starting to feel like a bit of a movement, if you will, in terms of university-based OSPOs. That's proving to be a really great place to do some of that connective tissue type work. But in addition to Curious, Zach had mentioned Helios. There's some interest in Helios around software as well. So I recently joined, actually, I think Zach, you did too, right? The advisory council for Helios. So we'll be representing relevant issues from RDA-US in that context too. The other group I'll say is the Research Software Alliance is another group I'm in touch with fairly frequently and trying to figure out sort of on that Venn diagram where there are places of common interest versus things that may be distinct to the research software lens versus the open software lens. And then in terms of engagement outside the US, it's primarily been in Europe. I'd mentioned those 20 university OSPOs. I believe 4 of them now are coming out of Europe. And there are organizations in Europe interested in open source software that we will want to engage with outside of RDA-US. There's like the Software Heritage is one that comes to mind. And even the National Library of France runs a very large open source software repository, for example. So we are trying to keep an eye in terms of things that's developing in Europe. One important particular development, again, you may not have heard of, is the Cyber Resilience Act, which is fundamentally about secure software and supply chain security for open source software, or any software, but particularly open source. And it has moved fairly substantially in the last few months. And there are now discussions around developing standards, I guess, for lack of a better word, around security and open source software. And I keep asking this question, keep getting the same answer. And that question is, were universities represented in those conversations? And the answer seems to be no, both within Europe and the US. So one of the other categories, if you will, of organizations we're engaging are the open source software foundations, like the Linux Foundation, Eclipse Foundation, Mozilla Foundation, Apache Foundation. They have formed a working group to examine next steps with the CRA. We are trying to figure out a gentle pathway onto that working group, or at least influencing the work of that effort. It could be a member of this RDA-US. It could be someone from Curious. It could be someone who's in both. For example, Zach. We're just trying to figure out the best way to get involved in the group and then who might represent the perspectives and obviously have a very good connection with RDA-US as those conversations move forward. But always happy to hear other groups or networks you think we should engage with. I don't mean this to be, exhaustive in any way.
That's great. Thanks, Saeed. And just from a program office perspective, I sort of keep a running spreadsheet of different organizations that Beth is reaching out to and other members of the steering committee are reaching out to. And, it includes a lot of the ones that have already been mentioned, but CNI, of course, Coalition for Networked Information, Global Biodata Coalition is another one, Force 11, I think might have been mentioned. Helios was definitely mentioned already, Curios, Pro4RS, the Association of Research Libraries. Cynthia Vitale is on our steering committee. She has a good in there, of course. The Open Modeling Foundation, OMF, I think Rob might have mentioned that. And there's another alliance, the Materials Research Data Alliance. And so these are just a lot of different things we're keeping an eye on, or we're reaching out to people in those groups. So yes, Zachary, fantastic idea and great opening question to get us talking about this here amongst our groups. So, who else might have anything to discuss around anything that we've already talked about or other questions that you want us to get to? We have about 15 minutes left. I did, for folks who are just joining, I'm going to put a collaborative doc that we have where if you could please put your attendance. And there's also, we've done quite a few presentations during the plenary 22, and there's sort of a combined slide deck. There's a PDF there of information about RDA-US and Tigris and just some of the other presentations that we've given during the plenary this time. So I also put an invitation to join our Slack instance for those of you who hadn't seen that yet, and I will repost that again. So, what other questions do folks have?
Very unrelated to what you all have been talking about, but again, just as a newcomer, a very general question. I know that Tiger is responsible, or at least connected to the Core Trust Seal in a way. So creating, I think they help create the guidelines that the Core Trust Seal application must follow. Does Tigris have any relationship with the core trust seal, or is that completely managed by Tiger? Or am I wrong about that even?
So Rob Quick's screen is blank.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hi, Rob.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my screen and why I've disappeared.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're still there because I think you're probably the best person to answer that question.
Yeah, so first, there's no RDA-US connection with Core Trust Steel, and I'm not aware that Tiger. I think that was most of that work was done well before even Tiger was a a service available to RDA. Though there may be something that I am not aware of in the relationship there between Tiger and Core Trust Steel.
No, it could just be, I'm looking at my old notes from another session I attended, and I must have just mistyped something. So
I thought Core Trust Seal is like a certification program for repository. It's the highest standard for repository. There's a one set of requirement criteria, like a desirable characteristics for data repository set by NSTC, but it was one level up. So if you get a Core Trust Seal, there are a set of rules you have to follow, and you get the seal. Like import is a Core Trust Seal repository. But I don't know, it's other than that, I don't know if they have an additional program other than like a certifying repository stuff. Not so
Yeah,
sure.
so a lot of the work and a lot of the initial discussions around Core Trust Steel happened within the RDA environment. I think it's one of their most well-known outputs of an RDA community. Though it has at this point become its own thing, which is really great. RDA should be incubating these groups while they're getting started up and while the discussion is happening, and then they should become their own project as they move forward. But as I said, I think that work, Dennis, was done well before Tiger was available. Tiger's only been around for a little longer than Tigris. They maybe have a year on us, and Tigris officially started up at the beginning of this year. So there's not I don't think that they were involved in that work, but I could be wrong. There could be some connection that I'm just not aware of.
No, I'm sure that I just mistyped something, but I appreciate you clearing that up for me. I mean, a very general RDA question at that point, not even Tigris related. So thank you for that.
And Sun Young is correct that it's a certification for repositories. Generally, that's kind of the space that they're playing in.
I didn't know it was an RDA product output. That's awesome. It's good to know. There's so much history behind to learn about.
I'm going to make a quick comment, and then I'm going to let Anna throw out her question or comment. It was interesting. I was leading the Tigris. I was leading the Tigris talk for the Tigris panel, and I found out that I thought Tiger had been around for a very long time. And I also, I didn't realize that their funding was going to end at a particular point. I'm sure that the work that they're doing is going to be considered so great that they're going to try to find continued funding after their funding runs out next year at the end of 2025. But that was interesting to me to find that out. I didn't know that yet. And we meet with the Tiger folks bi-weekly, Rob Quick and I do. So yeah, we're all learning about each other's groups all the time. Anna, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to take this opportunity to see if I could get a little group input on what might be of interest from a generalist repository BOF at the Costa Rica meeting. This is something the GRAY program, especially those of us that are working on community outreach, are currently putting a proposal together for. And we gave a presentation about our GRAY work as part of the International Data Week program in Salzburg, where we mostly gave kind of updates about the work that we're doing, including on common metadata and common metrics, data citations. And we also do a lot of we're doing quite a bit of work on training and resources for the community. which I think is important, especially for the data librarian community. But I realized that the RDA community in particular are sort of experts in the infrastructure. And so one thing we're thinking about doing with this BOF is trying to get input on sort of the standards that we're adopting as part of GRAY. So for metadata, for PIDs, ontologies, metrics, things like that. And I guess the initial proposal is to consider the BOF sort of a discussion of generalist repositories as part of the larger data repository ecosystem. How do we fit in? What standards are we setting? What should we be doing to play the right role in that landscape as one of the players in combination with IRs and discipline-specific repositories and such? So I wondered if that appeals to people. Would that be a BOF you would come to? And what other what else would you like to discuss with the generalist repositories or hear from us?
So I see that Steve said that would be something he's interested in. Is that
Thanks, Steve. Steve's part of GRAY too. Thank you for your support.
So let me say from, and this is with my RDA tab hat on, a BOF should be used to gather ideas to move towards a working group. Do you have something that would that the BOF would be working towards, or have you thought about what potentially you could have as the products of a working group? I know this a BOF is also a good place to gather those,
right.
but do you have some ideas going in as to where the BOF might lead to down the road?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I think we would want to kind of gauge the community's interest in that as part of the BOF. The first thing that occurs to me is sort of the standards recommendations that we've been developing, and could you turn those into a working group for repositories to adopt beyond GRAY? Because that is sort of the hope of coming up with a common metadata schema, which is really just based on data sites schema, and things like that, where we're leveraging other community initiatives. But the hope is that, okay, our 7 repositories adopt these standards, and then other discipline-specific or IR repositories also adopt the same. So we could perhaps have a working group focused on those, but might need to be a bit more particular.
I have a I have a kind of suggestion about the GRAY community. So there's a talk about, actually there was a recent announcement of from the CEDA metadata workbench. So they create metadata sample template. They work with the Dryad, so they did one of the metadata template for neuroimaging and all. But the gap between domain-specific repository and then generalist repository, including institutional data repository, is discoverability of data sets, because you're using very general metadata template from data site, metadata schema. But
yeah.
the reason for domain-specific repository is better for data discovery because of data type-specific metadata. So if you can close the gap by implementing something like a CEDA metadata template, which can be standardized, can be deployed into a lot of generalist repositories, including institutional repository, but GRAY can lead that effort in a way. Mm-hmm. So I think I discussed it with
I think Dryad and OSF are the ones that have implemented.
ODSS, you leader of the GRAY repository. ODSS.
Ishwar.
Yes, Ishwar. I discussed this with Ishwar once, and then also Mark Musin, and then I was really happy to see that article coming out. I know CEDA metadata template workbench is working with OSF as well. So already 2, OSF and then Dryad, those are 2 out of 6 GRAY repositories. So I would like to see something coming out of a GRAY community, not just one-on-one. And that'd be a great discussion to have in the next plenary if we can organize something like that.
Mm-hmm. So there's that tension between the the benefits of discipline-specific metadata and the
Yes.
flexibility of the generalist, and what's the middle ground we could all agree on facilitating.
You're kind of closing the gap. So,
Mhm.
it's not just a general metadata collection. You provide it. So it's like a conditional thing. So if your data.
Yeah, we have met with Mark, and certainly some of the repositories are doing. It's not currently in our collaborative plan that we all would implement that, but certainly something to consider. Steve,
Right.
you can jump in.
Right. So
Yes.
if you did data type of certain things, then you can go to this type of specific metadata template. Jack just put it in a chat, API is available. So, we could start using that. Anybody can create this template and then just bring it in. But you have to make this connection. If your data type certain, falls into that, then use this metadata template, something like that. Because there's a very specific metadata template, like flow cytometry or sequence data, all this stuff.
The other thing I would add is that these skew biomedical. There's a much more complete suite of ontologies because this came out of NCBO and NIH. But we could talk, going back to what Zachary was saying earlier in terms of, connecting with other initiatives underway. I think the right level of the community to create these is professional societies. And, for example, AGU has a really strong open science presence and orientation. They care a lot about data. So we could come up with some network for, identifying gaps. If there exists a gap in a disciplinary ontology, we get it into NCBO, CEDAR, and then you can adjust it on the gray side. And the other thing I would say, so that Anna very eloquently articulated the benefits of each. But the other thing I've noticed is that specialist repositories tend to be where the action is for scientists, because there's also community around those. But the generalist repositories are much, much better at standards. So I had a project here at Stanford where they were trying to get their work published in Nature, but they didn't have some basics like DOIs. So it's like, I think we could probably work out some kind of front end, back end thing where we let them do their work in their model repos, where it might be too big even to move into something like, Dryad or Figshare. Like, these are massive. But if it's metadata and DOI minting, and then we look at where those gaps are, so like how might generalist repos that are very strong in fundamentals and fixity and things that data librarians care about, and let them be great at their thing, and how do we integrate?
Steve, you've had your hand up a while, sir. I'm gonna
well, I may be one of the few people here who's had their fingers in every aspect of this metadata game. And I came in as the product manager for Dryad and had to shepherd through CEDAR, and it was a ton of work for a very small payoff. And I think that one of the reasons that Anna and other journalist repositories don't have it in their immediate work plan is because it has to be resourced. And it can be a bottomless pit as soon as you move away from, like Zach said, places that have these very standard control vocabularies. And I think the thinking is, and it's unproven, that if you put it out there and make it available, it's going to be adopted and used, and that there's going to be an uptick of discoverability, and that, all of the people who are data depositors are going to be super happy because they have another form to fill in. I think that there is some middle ground to be played. And when we look at the repository landscape, the institutional, the generalist, and the domain, I think was mentioned earlier, it's the domain repositories that usually have the scientists who work in that field. And so there's a great deal of care and concern around every last byte of data, how it's used. Usually the users and the depositors may be the same people. That is generally not true with generalist repositories, and institutional repositories end up being more numerous, but somewhere in the middle. Institutional repositories tend to live a little bit longer. National repositories can live longer, but sometimes go away, like carbon data in the ocean is just vanished because DOE got out of that game. So I think that when we play in this landscape, generalist repository seem to have the staying power, and people tend to go toward them. but their dance cards are pretty full because they got to make payroll and they got to make things. We tend to see with generalist repositories, they are meeting the researchers where they are, rather than what we usually do on the research side is theoretically we think something is going to work and we build it, and only to find out that the adoption may be yet another activity that needs to be really well resourced. So a note of caution about how successful these things are, and what the theory tells us and what is actually true on the ground. Awareness around things like DOIs is extremely low out where the researchers are. And just getting the awareness up about that, control vocabularies, digital preservation, and machine actionable DMPs would be an enormous win. And I know it's not as glitzy as some of the other things, but if we put our energy there, I think that will be a much bigger payoff than some of the efforts that I've seen that go toward having well-structured metadata. Because I have yet to see a single study prove in the wild that having metadata at scales large enough to be measured gives you something significant to talk about.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah. Two quick follow-ups to that and to Saeed's mention in the chat, which is very timely. So Zach, I think you made a good point about the DOIs and PIDs and those standards and discipline specific. And that's something that our NIH program team for GRAY is hoping that GRAY can help facilitate across that landscape. So if you're familiar with the DRKB program, also funded with ODSS and across ICs at NIH, that's the group we're working with in some ways to cross-pollinate those standards. And then, yes, about generalist repositories being IRs, we're actually going to be releasing, hopefully just in a few weeks, a new case study as part of our GRAY use case catalog, specifically about generalist repositories as institutional repositories, or supporting institutional data sharing in whatever form they do that, through memberships, through configured repositories, and whatnot, because that's an important part of the landscape as well. And I'm actually giving a FastWeb webinar tomorrow where I'm going to talk about KiltHub, the CME repository, and a researcher is going to present the data set that's in there as part of multiple repository use case. Anyway, I'll stop talking unless more people have additional feedback for me, but I don't want to run us over time. Thanks all.
That's great. And I've noticed with these sessions that we are listed to end about a minute ago, but they don't end the session until I end the session. So we can keep talking. The discussion is great. Saeed's like, oh no, we might be here all day. No, so this has been great discussion. If people have to leave, I completely, the power. Thank you, Zach. I completely understand. And this has been great discussion today. It gives us some good ideas for the program office here, RDA-US. One thing that was asked in chat that I did want to maybe get in the recording so I don't forget it. Somebody asked about funding, and Indiana University is set up, and this is one of the reasons that RDA-US is set up and tied to a university. We can take donations to help fund RDA-US, and we can also recoup indirect costs from grant funding. So those are two things that one of the reasons that it's helpful to have the program office tied to a university. That's one of the reasons that it's helpful to do that. So
I did ask a question about who is going to write a grant proposal to, ask for funding.
Yeah, so the program office, that's one of our tasks. So Beth Playley, our executive director, she's actually been talking with NASA and with NIH and with the National Science Foundation, all three of those large funding institutions, about different ways that we can host workshops, that we can bring people together to do some of the work of the working groups or of the interest groups, or to take some of these ideas that folks have or that have been around for a while, but bring them more to fruition and have some products that come out of it that are based, have the voice of the US, but can have the international perspective of the RDA. So yep, that's one of our tasks, but we're always looking for other people to help with that. We are just 4 people.
Yeah, and let me say that depending on what the proposal is, we may reach out to members of the community to help with those proposals. There is one that did go in based on the education program we have, and it was in collaboration with the South Big Data Hub. So back to the Big Data Hub. So we will reach out to community experts to assist and collaborate in some of those proposals as necessary, depending on what exactly the proposals goal and needs are. So I think that having a robust community around us allows us some opportunities to go down things that might specialize. Now, if anyone on the call is planning on putting something in and want to have RDA-US as a collaborator, then you definitely contact the program officer and we'll work with you to see what RDA can contribute to your project. So we're happy to both lead projects, but we're also happy to offer the services and expertise that we have through RDA-US. And in fact, the education project that I mentioned the lead organization is Georgia Tech and the South Big Data Hub, where it has RDA playing a role with the curriculum that was developed through the CODATA RDA schools for research data science.
I have one more question, if you don't mind. So Shelley Stowe was here earlier, but she left. So, but she's chairing the working group. I think it's an RDA working group called Complex Citation. It was quite fascinating. So, they're working on Lily query. They're pulling a lot of different DOIs and, PIDs and stuff to make data set more discoverable. And they're ending their working group. And they likely create a new one. I don't know if they will be created as a part of, RDA-US or RDA. And so is RDA-US focusing something that would be specific to US, or can it be, generally applied to, global RDA, for example?
Yeah, so let me say that first of all, there are no working groups within RDA-US. The working groups happen within RDA, right?
Okay.
The RDA-US helps with the US components of working groups that function within RDA. A lot of times, especially with the things that we're dealing with now with national PID strategies and machine actionable data management plans, is taking what it was done within the global RDA and applying it to the US community. At least with Tigris and RDA-US, we're focused on US-based researcher needs, and that means going through the RDA global processes to make sure that they are internationally informed and that the results come back having been vetted within the greater RDA, but then the application happens within our institutions and our national policy and such. So RDA-US itself doesn't have working groups. What it has is thrusts or focus areas, and that's what Zach is leading the open science focus area, and Saeed is leading the software focus area, and then Beth is doing the cyber infrastructure and artificial intelligence focus area. Those are not working groups. Those are just areas of focus where we are putting some energy to build those communities and processes around those subjects. But RDA-US itself does not run working groups or interest groups or communities of practice. What we do is we assist that work that happens within RDA Global. So I hope that clarifies things a little bit.
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. That was perfect. All right, folks. Well, I am super energized to see so many people today. I've been on some of the other sessions, and some of them have not had very many people. So really thanks so much to the steering committee members who took time out of their day today to join us, and the folks who this really great discussion. So thank you all for attending. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer, but and Rob or Yolanda, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in.
No, I agree that it was great discussion, and thanks everybody for coming. And if you want to give us other feedback, there is contact information that Rob just put in the chat, or you can contact me directly if you have any questions that you just want to run by me before sending to a general group. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you in the RDA-US context, and hopefully seeing most of you in Costa Rica in 6 months, where I think we have a lot of exciting things that'll be happening.
Yeah, and on that note, the closing session tomorrow is in a time zone that's friendly to us, I believe. So I think everyone will be learning more about Costa Rica and the plenary in Latin America and what they're doing. So try to tune in on that, and we'll try to engage with you as much as we can on things that are going on the global front with the Secretariat website, things like that. So just stay tuned for more. But thank you for coming today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I love the fireworks, Steve.
Steve, you're muted. You're muted.
That wasn't me saying, why am I muted? What happened to Rob? Rob, if you turn off the background,
know.
do you reappear?
I don't know what happened just halfway through this. I'm also getting some weird speaker crackling, so I have a feeling that Zoom is experiencing some strange things. So I would have dropped off and came back, but we were 10 minutes to the end of the session, so I thought I'd just stick it out.
You're on your old MacBook Air, aren't you?
No, I'm on a loaner because that MacBook Air crashed about 2
Oh,
weeks ago.
my goodness. So I do know that Zoom with the latest update is way more CPU intensive.
Is it? Because
way more. Like if you're on a Mac and you bring up Activity Monitor and watch when you bring up Zoom, it just consumes every available resource, no matter, unless you're on like an M3.
Great.
So yeah, it's trying to do a lot, with the background and all of the processing it's trying to do. So yeah. Anyway, that was a good session.
I'm on a loaner laptop this week, and hope to be back to having one of my own next week. It's been ordered, but so it could be processing power here. So yeah, I agree. There was no quiet parts. We didn't need to end early because nobody was talking. There was some really good discussion. I was really happy with the session.
Yeah, really good. You guys did a really good job of, getting the word out, inviting people, reminding them that it was there. Great to have enough time to actually have discussions, as opposed to filling it with, death by PowerPoint.
Right.
All good calls.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
We had about 30 slides ready to go just from other talks that we gave during the plenary, just in case. And I don't think I really even needed to do the ones that I did, but I wanted people to see who the rest of the steering committee, that we have a wide variety of representation in the steering committee, and just to sort of see our governance structure, because it's a little new for this decade of RDA-US. So
and a fast fix to get my favorite.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say nearly everyone.
I know what Steve was trying to say. He goes, and a fast fix to get Steve added. I had to add Amy really quick too, because you and Amy were the two who were added after our first meeting.
Okay.
So yeah, I had to add Amy in there really quick too. So
well, I'm in good company then.
You took Steve. We are connected. That was exactly what I was getting ready to say. You two were a good company. So, but thanks for letting me know, because sometimes I'm just not looking. I need to look closer at the details sometimes, because I grabbed those slides from our very first meeting, not even thinking about the fact that we've added more experts to our steering committee. So we're glad to have you.
Yeah, no, it was all good. Hey guys, I'm gonna drop off. Thanks again. This was really, really good stuff. I'm energized.
Yeah.
Thanks,
I think a dozen people was right. Almost everybody was active at some point, so it wasn't. There weren't too many people that were sitting in the background not talking. And so I think 12 is actually a really good size to have, like, for an office hours session like that. I think if it gets to be like 30, like Europe had, then half the group just kind of fades away, and you don't know if they're paying attention at all. But everybody there was active. So again, just like you, Steve, I'm energized with that, and it looks like that's a nice good core